Hello, everyone. I think that this is an amazing presentation. Here I am, an African. Africa is among the most impacted by the sea cube.
Yeah,
We see the the prevalence of war in Africa, poverty, low incomes in Africa, and all of this as a result of inculturation. Okay, and so this is difficult, and I wanted to see Um, how deep have you thought of Africa as a special case in all of this?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's become the dominant culture. So it is now the enculturation. It's no longer even the inculturation. So yeah,
of
I'm
course.
in Africa because I'm down in South Africa here. I don't know if you've had a look at what Kenya's doing, but I find that quite exciting, the sort of ethos that's busy emerging in Kenya. But I'm also what I'm seeing is I don't think in Africa it's going to be about collapsing the sea cube because you've also got this aspirational thing that happens when people have been denied access to education at all, and then they get sort of lured by this C cubed promise, then that's what they want. It's the same as, trying to do sustainability in communities that weren't allowed to own property or could never afford a car. It's like they want a Mercedes Benz. It's perfectly understandable. The problem that you have in my country where women don't want to breastfeed because now, formula feeding is more sort of higher status, and they don't want to give natural birth because we should all have the right to a C-section in a hospital. So you have that problem, but at the same time we have a horrible opportunity because when people are actually desperate to survive, they are more likely to come together if you can give them an opportunity to become empowered at a local level with their neighbors. Because, firstly, they are unemployed, they don't have to go to work. And secondly, they are desperate enough to consider all options. So now, if you can pull people together in a community, and here I'd like to invite you to have a look at what India has done with the neighborocracy system, because the neighborocracy system looks at pulling together people who live in close proximity to collaborate on solving their local problems together. And what they do is they also create children's parliaments, that they create three layers of neighborocracy. There's one for the adults, one for the teens, and one for the smaller kids. And they all start collaborating on what are our exact, immediate, most pressing problems and how can we pull together to solve them. So the example I always love using is the one Indian village where there was the way they organize it is they become ministers of agriculture and what um, in their little neighborhood parliament. So the minister for economics identified a family who had no income, but they had a field behind the house. Then everybody chipped in for a loan to buy a milk cow for that family to put in the field. Then the family started selling milk to the neighbors who didn't have to walk 30 kilometers down the road to get fresh milk. And then they were able to pay back the loan from the proceeds of selling milk to their neighbors. So these kind of micro solutions that are not attractive to people who have a greater degree of wealth or access can actually be the foundation for something really quite empowering and actually very educational. Because the other thing is that we're seeing that neighborocracy system in India, it's now been going long enough that some of these young people have turned into really very empowered advocates and are going into government and all of this sort of stuff. So we're looking really at complementing C cubed in Africa with grassroots real education. So you get your education in spite of your schooling rather than relying on your schooling. Because as you say, even the good and the bad news is that C cubed isn't possible in Africa because we don't have the resources. Tiny number of the population even has a textbook, right? But the advantage of that is it does mean that if you play your cards right, we can increasingly provide educational opportunity And another thing I'd like to suggest you have a look at is the brand new Native Child of the World website, which I'm involved with, which is started by some San people here in South Africa, which is looking at using the internet to bring together wisdom keepers and indigenous kids to be able to interface on the virtual level, to be able to actually start conserving some of those positive cultural practices that, as you say, are otherwise, some have already been lost, but there's still a lot, especially in terms of sustainable local agricultural practices and medicinal practices that can still be salvaged if we're quick. So I invite you to have a look at that and participate in helping that grow. But thank you for raising this because it's so important. And yeah, I always like to think Africa can end up leading the way, It's just like how I think.